Okay, I want you to close your eyes for a second. Just imagine you are standing in a courtroom.
Hmm.
But this isn't, a normal municipal building with bad lighting and sticky floors. This is the Supreme Court of the universe.
Right.
The atmosphere is heavy, suffocating, really. And you aren't sitting in the jury box. You're the defendant.
And the prosecutor, who's, standing across from you, he is not looking for a plea deal. He is absolutely relentless.
Yeah.
The source material for this deep dive actually opens with a scene, I think it's from Revelation 12:10,
Okay.
and it describes an accuser who is just standing before God, listing charges day and night.
That is just a terrifying image because usually in the movies, this is the part where the hero stands up and shouts, "Objection, that's a lie, I didn't do it." But here, the text says the accused person is standing there in sin-stained garments.
Which implies the objection never comes.
Oh,
because the accusations are, well, they're actually true.
that is the twist that really, it really hit me when I was reading through these notes. The prosecutor, Satan, in this context, is basically saying, God, look at this person. You claim to be just. Well, look at their selfishness. Look at their pride. Look at the things they thought no one saw.
By your own laws, they belong to me.
Exactly.
And legally speaking, within the framework of this whole narrative, he has a point.
He does.
The text describes this trap, where the accuser leads people into skepticism and sin, only to turn around and claim them as his lawful captives. It's a hopeless situation.
The hopeless.
The defendant is mute because they're guilty.
Until the advocate walks in, and this is where the whole dynamic just shifts completely.
Right. Jesus enters the courtroom. But you have to pay close attention to how he argues the case.
Okay.
He doesn't argue innocence. He doesn't try to minimize the charges or say, oh, they had a bad childhood.
The source material used a phrase here that I just absolutely loved. It says, he vanquishes the accuser by the mighty arguments of Calvary.
The mighty arguments of Calvary. That is such a heavy line.
It is.
It means his defense is his own sacrifice. He stands between the judge and the guilty party and says, yes, the charges are real. They are guilty.
But
I have paid the price for that guilt. He effectively transfers the liability from the defendant to himself.
So we're starting with this massive, high-stakes, cosmic drama, the great controversy.
Huge.
But our mission today is to kind of zoom in. We're taking that cosmic courtroom scene and seeing how it lands in the actual messy life of a single person. We are doing a deep dive into reconciliation and hope, primarily based on Paul's letter to the Colossians, chapter 1.
And we're going to find that this isn't just about some legal transaction or checking a box. It's about a relationship.
Right.
We have some incredible sources to work through today, including the story of a very, very stubborn accountant in the Middle East.
Ah, yes.
A tragic box of unopened letters, and a deep linguistic look at what it actually means to be perfect or mature in this faith.
Okay, so let's start with the architecture of this reconciliation. Because, in my experience, if I get into a fight with a friend, reconciliation is usually a two-way street. I apologize, you apologize, we meet in the middle for coffee.
That is exactly how human relationships work. But the sources highlight a really critical distinction here.
And that is?
In the architecture of divine reconciliation, there is no meeting in the middle. Humans do not initiate the peace talks.
The notes point to Genesis 3, verse 9 for this pattern. After Adam and Eve really mess up the one job they had.
Just the one job.
They don't run to God saying, hey, we made a mistake, let's fix this.
No, they run to the bushes. They hide.
And who comes looking?
It's God. Walking in the garden calling, where are you? And that right there, that sets the template for everything that follows in the biblical narrative. Reconciliation isn't humans trying to appease some angry deity. It is God trying to win back enemies who are actively hiding from him.
To illustrate this one-way initiative, the lesson material brought up the story of Elizabeth Barrett Browning, the famous Victorian poet.
How do I love thee? Let me count the ways.
That's the one. So the backstory here is that her parents strongly, and I mean strongly, disapproved of her marriage to Robert Browning. They essentially disowned her.
Wow.
But Elizabeth refused to let the relationship die. For 10 years, she wrote letters to her parents, almost every week.
10 years.
Asking for reconciliation, expressing love, just trying to bridge that gap.
10 years is a long time to ride into the void.
It is. And they never replied. Not once. Finally, after a decade, a large box arrives in the mail for Elizabeth.
Okay.
She opens it up, probably thinking, okay, this is it. They finally come around. This is the peace offering.
But inside,
Inside the box are all of her letters.
unopened.
They hadn't even read them. The seal was never broken. And the source makes this point. Had her parents opened and read only a few of them, a reconciliation might have been effected.
Oh, that is devastating. The overture for peace was there. The love was there. The debt of the relationship had effectively been covered by her persistence.
Right.
But because the letter was rejected unopened, the relationship just stayed dead.
And the expert commentary connects this directly to the Bible. It calls the scriptures God's letter of reconciliation.
It's a perfect analogy. God is the one writing. He's the one setting the box. But reconciliation, by its very definition, it requires a response. It's not automatic. You have to open the envelope.
This actually helps explain a distinction in the gospel that I think gets a little muddy for a lot of people. The study guide breaks the gospel down into 3 specific phases. I think we need to define these clearly because they explain how we open that letter.
Definitely. So phase 1 is the objective fact. That's the courtroom scene and the cross. Jesus died for sins. He paid the debt.
Okay.
That is a historical reality that happened, regardless of whether you believe it, like it, or even understand it. The letter is in the mailbox.
Okay, so that's the objective reality. What's phase 2?
Phase 2 is justification. This is the act of opening the letter. It's when you personally accept that death on your behalf. You say, I claim that advocate. That sets you free from the condemnation we were talking about earlier.
And phase 3, this is the one that I think often gets left out of the simple elevator pitch version of Christianity.
Phase 3 is sanctification. This is living a life that's united with Christ. The notes call it experiencing his recreating power. It's not just getting out of jail. It's having the one who paid your bail move into your house to help you clean up the mess you made.
I really like that image. So it's a progression. The check is written. That's phase 1. The check is cashed, phase 2.
Yep.
And then the money is actually used to rebuild the house. That's phase 3.
Precisely. And the sources emphasize that while we separate them to understand them logically, in reality, they all just flow together.
Right.
But the foundation is always that first step, initiating the rescue while we were still hiding in the bushes.
This idea of the advocate moving into the house leads us to a phrase Paul uses in Colossians that it sounds like a title from a mystery novel.
Huh.
The mystery hidden from ages.
It does sound dramatic, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Colossians 1:26.
So dispel the fog for us. Is this some kind of secret handshake?
Oh.
A hidden map to the Holy Grail? What is it?
It's so much better than that. The mystery, according to Paul in our commentary, is simply this: Christ in you, the hope of glory.
Christ in you.
Yeah. To understand why that was such a mystery, you have to know the context of the ancient world. Paul is writing to a mixed audience, Jews and Gentiles.
Okay.
For centuries, the operating system was that God dwelt in the temple behind a thick curtain, or specifically with the nation of Israel, he was over there. The mystery that shocked the first century world was that the God of the universe intended to dwell inside the human heart. And not just Jewish hearts, but Gentile hearts too.
So the mystery isn't a riddle to solve. It's a revelation of intimacy.
Exactly. It's the difference between knowing the king exists in the capital city and having the king move into your spare bedroom.
Speaking of living arrangements, we probably need to look at where Paul was when he wrote this, because he wasn't sitting in a comfortable study with a view of the Mediterranean sipping espresso.
No, not at all. Paul is in chains. He's under house arrest in Rome. He can't travel. He can't plant churches.
Right.
For a guy like Paul, who is basically the ultimate startup founder of the early church, constantly moving, constantly building, this must have felt like a total disaster.
But the notes point out something fascinating here. They use a specific Greek word to describe Paul's view of his situation. The word is oikonomia.
Oikonomia.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where we get our English word economy.
Economy.
But in ancient Greek, it had a richer meaning. It meant stewardship or household management.
Household management.
Yes. Paul views his suffering, his imprisonment, not as bad luck or a failure of the mission, but as a specific oikonomia, a specific way God is ordering the household of faith.
So him being in prison was part of the management strategy.
In hindsight, absolutely. I mean, think about it. Because he was locked up, he couldn't speak to crowds. So what did he do?
He wrote.
He wrote letters. Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, Philemon. If Paul hadn't been arrested, we might not have a huge chunk of the New Testament.
Wow. So the management plan involved silencing him in the short term just to amplify his voice for the next 2,000 years.
Exactly. And the sources pivot here to a big picture perspective. They mention Joseph and Ruth as other examples of this oikonomia.
Joseph is the classic one.
Yeah.
Betrayed by his family, sold into slavery, thrown in jail for a crime he didn't commit.
It looked like his life was over. But the source quotes Ellen White saying, "In the providence of God, even this experience was to be a blessing to him.
How so?
He learned things in the dungeon that the palace could never teach him. And ultimately, that suffering allowed him to save the entire region from starvation." Ruth was a Moabite widow. She probably felt like a bit player in some tragic story, but she ends up being the great-grandmother of King David and an ancestor of Jesus.
The implication being that we are all sort of actors in a story much bigger than ourselves. We just don't have the full script.
We don't, and that requires a tremendous amount of trust in the manager, the one handling the oikonomia.
To bring this down to earth, because sometimes these biblical examples can feel a bit distant, the source material included a modern story. It's about an accountant named Rene Tucaldo. And I think this just perfectly illustrates this idea of stewardship and trusting the plan when it makes absolutely no sense.
This is the story from the mission reading, right? It's a great case study.
So Rene is from the Philippines. He's a Seventh-day Adventist, which means he takes the Sabbath Saturday very seriously as a day of rest and worship.
Which, let's be honest, is a major career liability in the corporate world.
Huge. He actually lost 2 jobs in the Philippines because he wouldn't work Saturdays. He has a wife, 2 kids, money is tight. He's praying for a solution. Finally, he lands a job in the Middle East.
Good pay, I assume.
Great pay. But there's a catch. In that country, the weekend was Thursday and Friday. Saturday was a normal business day.
Oh no. So he moved his family halfway across the world just to land in the exact same trap.
Exactly. He asks his boss for Saturdays off. Boss says absolutely not. So for 2 years, Rene goes to the office on Saturdays.
Oh man.
But here's the compromise. He doesn't work. He just sits at his desk.
That is incredibly awkward.
It's excruciating. He sits there reading his Bible or religious books. His boss knew but tolerated it as long as he was physically present. But Rene felt terrible. He felt like a hypocrite, compromising his conviction by even being there.
Yeah.
He prayed for 2 years, "Lord, give me a chance to go to church."
And here is where that actor in a bigger story concept really comes in.
He asks his boss again. The boss finally snaps and says, "Look, I can't change the rules. I will only let you have Saturdays off if the king himself changes the national weekend."
Which is the boss's way of saying when pigs fly.
It's impossible. National laws don't change to accommodate one accountant. But Rene keeps praying. 3 months later, the boss is in Europe. Rene goes to work on a Saturday morning, just dreading another day of staring at the wall. He checks his email. There's an email from the boss. It says, "Rene, I heard the news from my king. I remember my promise."
No way.
The king had actually signed a decree moving the entire nation's weekend to Friday and Saturday.
That is why.
Rene didn't even know. He was sitting there dreading work while the law had already been changed.
I love that story because it grounds the theology. First, it shows persistence. But second, it shows that oikonomia, God's management, it operates on levels we can't see. The source argues that God orchestrated national events, a king's decree, to answer the prayer of one faithful steward.
It really reinforces the idea that we just don't know what levers are being pulled behind the scenes.
Precisely. We see the desk. God sees the king's schedule.
But, and there is always a but in these deep dives, we have to address the if in the room.
Ah, yes. Colossians 1.23.
Paul writes about all this amazing reconciliation being holy and blameless, and then he drops this line: "If indeed you continue in the faith, grounded and steadfast."
That little word, if, scares a lot of people.
It does. It sounds like a trap door. You're saved if you don't mess up. The source material spends a lot of time on this because it directly challenges the popular doctrine known as once saved, always saved.
Right, and the source makes a really nuanced argument here. It says that while the Greek grammar Paul uses implies confidence-like, he actually expects them to continue, it is still a condition. It isn't automatic.
So how do we understand this without falling into that trap of thinking we have to earn our salvation every single morning?
We have to look at the metaphors Paul uses, grounded and steadfast. Grounded is an architectural term, like a building on a solid foundation.
Oh.
And steadfast means immovable. The idea isn't that God is looking for a reason to kick you out. It's that salvation is a relationship. If you walk away from the relationship, you disconnect yourself from the source of life.
Like the unopened letters again?
Exactly. The letters keep coming. But if you stop opening them, or if you, throw the whole box away, The connection is severed, not because the sender stopped loving, but because the receiver stopped receiving.
The sources also bring up the concept of perfection here, which that usually stresses people out. Colossians 1.28 talks about presenting everyone perfect in Christ Jesus. Now, when I hear perfect, I think flawless. I think never makes a mistake, and frankly, I'm out.
And that is a really common linguistic misunderstanding. The Greek word here is teleos. It doesn't necessarily mean flawless in the sense of never tripping up. It means mature, complete, or fully grown.
The lesson used an analogy about a baby versus a teenager that I found really helpful.
Yes. Think about a baby. When a baby takes its first steps, it wobbles, it falls down, it maybe gets 2 steps and then just crashes. Does the parent say, that's imperfect, you're rejected?
No, of course not. They cheer, they post it on Instagram, they call the grandparents.
Right. For a baby, that struggle is perfection at that stage. It's age-appropriate growth. But if you have a teenager who is still crawling on the floor and babbling, you worry. You take them to a doctor. Something is wrong.
So perfection in this context is about appropriate growth.
Exactly. It's about movement. The source quotes Ellen G. White defining sanctification. She says, the followers of Christ are to become like him, to form characters in harmony with the principles of his holy law. Note that word form. It's a process. It's about the direction of the life, not just a snapshot of a single moment.
So it's not about being a statue that never moves. It's about being a living thing that is growing into a specific shape, the shape of Jesus.
Yes. And that connects right back to the if. We continue in the faith. We don't continue in our own grit. We continue in the reliance on his strength. The danger isn't struggling. The danger is giving up on the connection.
I think that distinction is vital. It shifts the focus from, am I good enough, to am I still holding on?
And am I allowing the manager, the oikonomia, to work on me? Remember, Paul says he labors according to his working, which works in me mightily. It's Christ's energy, not just Paul's willpower.
So let's recap where we've been. We started in a cosmic courtroom where we were guilty, standing in dirty clothes.
But the advocate stepped in with the arguments of Calvary.
We moved to the mystery that this advocate doesn't just defend us. He moves in with us. Christ in you.
And we saw through Paul and Renee that this indwelling Christ manages our lives, our oikonomia, sometimes through prisons, sometimes through Sabbath conflicts, always for a bigger purpose.
And finally, we saw that the requirement isn't to be instantly flawless, but to be steadfast, to keep opening the mail, to keep growing up into maturity.
That's a great summary. It takes the abstract theology and really makes it a life map.
But the sources stress one more thing. The so what? Why does any of this matter? For the person listening right now, maybe on their commute, maybe doing dishes.
It matters because it reframes your suffering and even your boredom. The sources argue that you are part of a long-range divine plan, conceived before the foundation of the world. Your life isn't random. If you are in Christ, your Tuesday afternoon struggles are part of that cosmic oikonomia. You are being shaped.
Which brings us to our final thought. We always like to leave you with something to chew on.
Right. I want to go back to Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Her parents never opened the box. The reconciliation failed because the message wasn't read.
Yeah.
Paul says in 2 Corinthians that we are epistles of Christ. We are letters.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
So here is the question for you, for the listener. If the mystery is Christ in you, and if your life is a letter written by God to the world around you, are you living in a way that if someone opened your life, watched how you treat people, how you handle stress, how you forgive, would they read a message of reconciliation, or would they find the page blank?
That is a heavy question. Is my life a letter that makes God's argument for him?
Exactly. Are you part of the mighty arguments of Calvary just by how you exist in the world?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into reconciliation, hope, and the mystery of it all.
It's been a pleasure.
We'll see you next time.